Good morning. Good morning. So, as you know, Pesach is the first Seder is a week week from Saturday night. So we're going to talk about getting our head in the game for the Pesach Seder. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So in the spirit of the season, with first Seder, 10 days from now or so, I wanted to ask you 4 questions. First question is, I want to ask you if your mind and heart and soul are set towards Passover, how you're feeling about it. So who here is like really, really into Passover? Like Passover is just what the doctor ordered. You're just jazzed about Passover. You're looking forward to that first Seder, and you're thinking about it, and you've got a lot of energy around Passover. I'd like and versus another alternative is, Passover. You're kind of flat about Passover. It's kind of flat. You're not really feeling it. It's like jumping up on you on the calendar, but emotionally you're not there. So I want to just talk about that. Who here is into Passover? Like you're excited about Passover. Anyone excited about Passover this year? And then we'll talk about what do you do if you're not excited about Passover. So who here is into Passover? Anybody? Harriet Mazansky, if you could please tell us you're thinking about being into Passover this year.
Well, I am into it because we're going to be able to be with our children and our grandchildren. So in that way, I am, and we're going to them, so they will take care of it. So that will be very nice.
So this is the fruit of vaccination. You're vaccinated, Cyril's vaccinated, so you can see them.
And some of the girls have been back, our daughters, and they are pretty careful. They're the same as we are. So please God, we'll all remain well.
Wow. So Harriet, is a material difference from last year, I take it.
Exactly.
We could actually see your kids and your grandkids, which you couldn't last year. Right. So for people who are going to be able to do that because of the vaccine difference, you've been vaccinated and therefore you can see them in person, that would definitely make you jazzed about the holiday coming up. Other voices who are into it, Leslie Zeises. And Leslie, if you can please unmute.
Yeah, that's a new one for me. Anyway, so yeah, I'm really happy to see all of you. I am into Passover because even before, I hate to say the market, I'm not kosher. I would go and look for the shank bones, and I would always be told, it's too early, it's too early, you're too early for the shank bones. It might have been 3 weeks before Passover because that was exciting. And I do have my great-grandmother's Seder plate, and I would set the table early. I just really liked it. And then there were the times when I realized how life is so precious, and I would take and put blood on the doorposts. I mean, I am more, I think I was more, not superstitious, but I would say observant of Passover than many other holidays. It just was very special. And of course, my dining room table and everybody. And I'm just very excited. I don't know if we will be with my children like you, Harriet. I know we will be with Zoom, but I'm not sure if we will be in person. But I think it's also new and I just think of so many people who have passed, and we think about the angel of death passing over us, and I hope really passes over all of us. And I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Leslie. So I want to then approach it from a different angle. Is there anyone on the call who's actually, if you're going to be honest about it, not into Passover? Like you're not feeling it, and maybe you usually like the holiday, but this year you're not feeling it. If you are, I would love to invite your voice. And let me just see. Okay. So here is what I want to do to get you ready for the holiday, ready or not, whether you're thinking about it or not, is I want to use some basic motifs of the Seder to help us think about this year's Seder. So one of the basic motifs of the Seder is that you tell stories through symbols. And and that's throughout the whole thing from beginning to end. That's the Seder plate, etc. The acme of that kind of thinking is the Rabban Gamliel teaching that I sent you in the email yesterday. Rabban Gamliel's teaching about Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, the three different symbols. And what I want to ask you to think about is what thing would you bring? What would be your symbol? If one of the icebreakers, one of the conversation topics were our pandemic year, the second year of a pandemic Passover, what thing would you bring that tells your pandemic story? What thing would you bring that tells your pandemic story? And that's a very authentic move. I'll give you an example. Right, I was talking to somebody who wants to really bring out the story of climate change, what happened in Texas, on Valentine's Day, etc. What they're going to do is put ice cubes on the table and let them melt to just symbolize that in real time, climate is changing and we have to pay attention to it. So what is a thing that you might bring that would add to your version of the story? Anyone wish to share? And by the way, feel free to also use the chat, and I will. I'm happy to, invite some engagement through the chat to get more voices. Some of you are more comfortable sharing than others, and if you're not comfortable sharing, speaking, then feel free to use the chat function as well. So, anyone want to share a thing you would bring to tell your pandemic story?
Rabbi, it's Mimi.
Mimi, thank you.
Okay. I would bring two things. I don't know how to bring a tear on my table for all the beautiful people that have passed away in the pandemic to talk and say a prayer and of thankfulness that I am sharing it with my daughter and son-in-law, but not Barton in California with his family, but we will through Zoom. And I would bring a heart. I would put a heart on the table because of all the beautiful people like you and our synagogue spiritual leaders who have given such heart to us, such joy, and has brought us through these difficult times by always being with us and sharing with us and having the conversations, and the community that has helped all the people in the hospitals and all the health workers. I would put a heart, and all the community that makes calls at our temple to those who are lonely. I would put those two symbols on my Seder table.
Wow. So, Mimi, in other words, your symbols embody and capture the deep emotional intensity of this season. The tear for the tears, there's so many tears. The heart for all the positive energy that comes from so many quarters, especially doctors, nurses, first responders, and the people in the front lines of, cash out, the cashiers at the supermarket where you shop, or at CVS or at Walgreens, who are in the presence of the public all day. And your symbols bring out that emotional intensity. Thank you. Thank you, Mimi. Anyone else want to bring a thing to your Seder table that would tell your story? By the way, if you're thinking about an icebreaker for the different people who are on your Zoom call, invite them to think about a thing that concretizes their pandemic year. It's kind of an evocative question, I think. Anyway, anyone else want to offer up offer up any ideas? Lynette. Now you're unmuted. Yes, good.
Okay, so because of the pandemic, we had an unusual situation with our pretty large family. So I'm speaking from Florida, where I am half the year, and we have 3 grandchildren who live here, and the California grandchildren moved here because of the pandemic, knowing that it would be just for that period of time. So the silver lining here is that we're going to have 6 quite young grandchildren around the Seder table. One of the sons is bringing a Passover in a box. And I guess this is an item it's very sort of primary for young children or for people who are just being introduced to Passover. So here's a family who are in varying degrees observant, mostly not, but want to introduce their children to the Passover. And so it's, for me, very exciting that our adult children want to do this. It's going to happen. And I can't wait to see the faces of the little ones who I know, of course, will enjoy it. So a Passover in a box, and that's what we're bringing to the table.
Beautiful, Annette. It should be a beautiful evening of the generations. Thank you for sharing that, Lynette. Annette Needle, your hand was up earlier.
Yes. During the year, our iPad broke, and we decided we could work with just the computer. And, you know, when we did FaceTime, we did it on our phone. And my birthday came, and my birthday was right around the time of all the things that were happening around Floyd. And I just didn't want to celebrate my birthday. But the kids convinced me we could do something minimal to acknowledge it. And I chose a way to celebrate it. But what they gave us was an iPad. But they gave us an iPad that had 2 pictures on it. I don't know if you can see. One is Peter and myself with the kids. The other side is swans, a picture taken when the baby swans were virtually 7 or 8 days old, behind the where Creighton Barrel used to be, the pond there. And what it represents to us, and every time we pick it up, is the support that our kids and grandchildren gave us to get through this year. So that each time we have, and we light candles together every Friday night on Zoom or FaceTime on the iPad. And each time we do that, the part of it, and we can see everybody. And we, you know, since the kids were probably in high school, we haven't done every night of Hanukkah together. And this year, we were able to do all 8 nights. I mean, many times I'd be in one city and Peter would be in another, and we were doing it with the phone. And so it was the power of their gift has just continued and continued and continued, but they have supported us. And it's made an amazing, well, it's made the difference.
Annette, thank you. That is just such a beautiful sharing. What a beautiful gesture of love, and also a beautiful gesture of connectivity, and beautiful. And that captures a lot of the spirit of this year, no doubt. Thank you, Annette. Anyone else want to share a thing you might bring? Sandy Klein.
Unmute. Did I unmute? Yes.
Yeah, you're perfect.
I would bring an empty grocery box to represent the food insecurity that has been increased during this pandemic, and to show the difference between the fact that we have a table full of food and we together. We'll be with Danielle and the kids, and the rest of the family via Zoom. So we're fortunate, but to show the difference of the fortunate from the not so fortunate.
Thank you. That's a very powerful situation and reality of our society, and that's kind of the point of the Seder to talk about it, and that symbol certainly would bring that up, Sandy. Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about a thing you might bring to capture a deep truth? Harriet Mazansky.
No,
I'm going to bring a document that we found. We've been going through some old papers, and we found this document that was signed by a number of servicemen who had served with my father in North Africa in the Second World War. And they had all signed up on this to join a Seder for Passover, which they celebrated in North Africa at Tobruk. So I feel our grandchildren are old enough to appreciate this and to see that no matter where you are and under all different circumstances, you can still observe Pesach.
Wow. That's, Passover on a wartime footing. And here we are in a different kind of wartime footing. Harriet, thank you. What a gift to give your grandkids. Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about a thing you might bring to drive home a truth? And again, if you're not comfortable sharing with words spoken, you can put it in the chat function. Fran Feldman and then Dottie.
I think I'd like to bring, at first I thought I'd bring a picture of my children, who I haven't seen in well over a year. But I think I'm going to bring a picture of a diverse world, peoples of all different kind, because in a way, the Seder is a microcosm of the search for freedom and hope and a future for all the different peoples of the world. And I think if anything has made us more aware of how intertwined, interconnected we are this year, it's brings together people of all colors, people of all backgrounds, people of all economic strains, because the pandemic has brought us all to the same place at the same time. And to me, it's just, in some ways, we've lived in very isolated times, and in other ways, we've totally interconnected with the rest of the world. And there's just this dichotomy and this difference that I think Passover symbolizes in our individual search for freedom and the entire world search for freedom and hope and future.
Wow. So your photograph speaks to the intertwined character, to the connectivity of all human beings that this pandemic brought out.
Right.
Wow. Thank you, Fran. Dottie, what would you bring? And Dottie, if you could please unmute. Dottie, you're still muted. Now you're unmuted. Yes.
Okay. Other than what I usually bring, this year, I think among my bundles, I'm going to one son's house who would not allow me near there. He would come here. He wouldn't disrobe, but off would come the shoes, the gloves would go on. He was so conscious of this pandemic, and he said, I don't want you out. I said, I cannot stay in. He said to me, we're trying to keep you alive and well. You have patience. Let's make a long story short. I have been vaccinated. He's been vaccinated. Mostly everybody in my family has. I think that what I want to bring up, which I never do, is a bouquet of flowers for the beauty of the holiday and the hope that we all have now, which is something that I think was taken from us through this past year, through our losses, through everything that went on. And to me, it's hope and the beauty of the holiday that is the most important. Those are the most important things.
Well, Dottie, thank you. What color flowers would you pick to convey hope? If you're at the flower department of your favorite flower source, what color?
Pink.
Pink.
Pink and white. And I think red roses I haven't thought that far ahead, but something that shows the cohesiveness of us all being here. I'll leave it to the florist. Thank you. I haven't thought about that far ahead.
Okay, well, I love that. I love that impulse. Okay, so as we approach the first Seder, let me invite you to think about, we've gotten different things, Passover in a box that conveys the eternal opportunity of transmitting the story to the next generation. We talked about flowers to speak about hope. We've talked about an empty box that speaks to food insecurity. We've got a letter from soldiers that speak about Passover in a war footing. We have an iPad given as a birthday gift that speaks to love of children and grandchildren for parents and grandparents. So every one of these things brings a powerful story of truth to this moment. I want to shift to the word ark, A-R-C, not A-R-K, because channel your inner Dr. King that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And the Haggadah has an arc, and I'll just read it to you. It's on the third page of the handout, but near the end of the Maggid section where we tell the story, what the Haggadah does, quoting from a Mishnah in Pesachim, Passover, is it brings us 5 binaries where we have a stark arc from really, really, really bad to really, really, really good. Okay, so I'm reading this to you now, right? Hotzianu, God took us, me avdut lecherut, from slavery to freedom. Stark arc. Mi yagon lesimcha, from despair to joy. Stark arc. Me evel leyom tov, from mourning, mourning, mourning to a holiday. Me afela laor gadol, from deep darkness to great light. Mishibud legeula, from subjugation, from oppression to redemption. V'nomar lafanav shira chadasha, and therefore, let's sing a new song to God who brought us from the dark, bad binary to the good, light binary. So my question to you is, if you were to describe the arc that we are in right now in March of 2021, how would you describe it? How would you describe it? Describe the moment we're in, describe the arc we're in. David Kopelman, thank you, my friend.
Well, despite COVID, I think particularly as Jews, we live in relatively joyful times historically. We have no pogroms in our villages, no expulsions from our homes like in 1492 from Spain, Portugal, England, and Europe. We're not being blamed for plagues and murdered by our neighbors. We're not being rounded up and sent on cattle cars to gas chambers in Poland. Instead of that, our arc goes to, we now have unparalleled freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We have an abundance of food. We have elaborate shelters from the cold. We enjoy modern conveniences, cars, TVs, internet. We have advanced healthcare and medical technology that saves lives, extends lives, like kidney transplants, cardiac bypasses, MRIs, CAT scans, and now we have the benefit of the COVID vaccines. So as Jews, our plight has really transformed from misery, suffering, to abundance and enjoyment of life.
So David, what's so interesting about your comment, if I hear you correctly, and tell me if I do or if I don't, that the stark arc of a redemptive God that the Haggadah paints, from darkness to light, from slavery to freedom, that you would feel comfortable applying that arc of redemption towards the modern Jewish story. When you think about, by the way, March, April, Passover, Easter was prime hunting season for Jews in Europe, because of passion plays and we're the Christ killers, etc. I mean, there's no doubt that this was the season when our ancestors in the Pale settlement were massacred. This is the season. That's not happening. And we have Israel and we have, right? So you're saying that this arc of redemption, despite COVID, you're comfortable speaking in that kind of a term. And now we have vaccines, etc.
Exactly.
Okay. By the way, there's a really interesting piece in the Daily yesterday about Israel and the vaccine and the complexities of Israel post-vaccine, the New York Times Daily. And that also, in a way, I mean, there's some ambiguity and some footnotes there. But
What are you going to say?
but still, Israel is getting back to life. And so that's a redemptive arc. Thank you, David. Other voices on how you would describe the arc that we're in. John Boris.
Yeah, I agree with David that there have been many advances. Unfortunately, I don't think it's binary because there are many people who have not benefited from these great advances. Jews and many non-Jews, poor people who do not have access to all these wonders, who do not have food security, who do not have clear shelter and are at real risk of losing their shelter. We can also look to Israel, the Palestinians, many of whom Israel is trying to inoculate, but many of whom not. So I don't think it's quite binary, as has been suggested.
So, John, I really appreciate that. And here's my question to you, my friend. What kind of geometry would you use then to describe the arc? Or what kind of language, what kind of vocabulary? I mean, the language of the Haggadah is an arc from bad binary to good binary. And I totally hear your reservations and qualifications and issues with it. Because it is, of course, true that there are those who are not covered by the redemption and who are left behind. That is obviously true in Israel, here, etc. So what would be the language what would be the language you would use?
Geometry was never my specialty, but segmented. Some people have it, some people don't. In fact, the Passover itself did not spare the Egyptians. So it isn't all bad to good. It's bad to good for some. And that, I think, is a basic problem.
And then just one last point, John. If you internalize your vocabulary of segments, what claim does that make on you?
A pretty obvious one, which is to try and increase the breadth of the bad to good segment and decrease the breadth of the no movement segment.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. By the way, not to hijack the class, but that's what we're trying to do with our cast dialogues. And I know that the cast dialogues are awkward and painful and, challenging, et cetera, in lots of ways. But what we're trying to do is an arc towards action that increases the segment of redemption. So we're working on that. Anybody else want to offer your description of arc or of the geometry of repair and redemption, or how you see it? And let me just also make sure that I'm not missing anybody. Okay. Now, here's my next question for you. The Seder deals with a super somber theme of slavery. Very somber. I mean, being slaves is very somber. And yet there is a lot of celebration and a lot of affirmation and a lot of joy. So here's my question. is it possible, it's March 2021 with all of the, there's been recovery, as David has wisely suggested, and that recovery has been uneven, as John has wisely cautioned, so that there is growth, but people left behind, and both are true. Is it possible to deal with the world as it is, with the unredeemed suffering, and also have this kind of festive, celebratory, joyful tenor that is what we're supposed to have at the Seder? What are your thoughts for grappling with the world as it is in a joyful way? Love your thoughts on that. And by the way, one way that I would invite you to think about this, and my colleagues and I are doing some work on this in real time, is what are songs, could also be poems or other, books, but songs that somehow capture the ethos of our age, capture the ethos of suffering that is real and not to be denied, and also that impel us towards redeeming the suffering. So, that's why we picked Eleanor Rigby, which definitely speaks towards suffering, but also, look at all the lonely people, we're supposed to respond. So if you can think about a song that takes in a message you would want to communicate at your Seder. So, Cindy, are you raising your hand? I would love to call on you if you are. Okay, so Cindy, if and when you can unmute, we would absolutely, and if I read you correctly that you'd like to share, we would love to hear what you have to say. So as soon as, if I did read that correctly and you can unmute, I would love to call on you again. And in the meantime, my question is, how are we going to talk about the world as it is and also be hopeful and helpful? And what songs might you think of that kind of capture that tension? Anybody? David.
Well, one song comes to mind is "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" Been picked by girls, given to soldiers, gone to war, gone to graves. That song, it's kind of grim, but I thought of when I heard the news this morning that 11-year-olds were being beheaded in Mozambique by this Islamic insurgents in that country. And I'm saying it just seems like war is an endless curse. If it doesn't take place in one part of the world, it's taking place in another. And the atrocities are getting worse and worse. And sadly, many of these wars then and today have been motivated by religion. Religious arrogance that ours is the truth, and if you're a non-believer, you must be beheaded.
Yeah.
So it's a sad truth today.
Thank you, David. Susan, what would you add?
I would add that if we're looking for perfection, we might as well, we're going to be looking forever, and that we have to find and in rituals and in some of our in religion and in other things, one finds a reason to hope and to go on and to pass on to our children. So in the worst of times, which this is not a good time, but I feel there have been much worse times. In the worst of times, you still have to hold on to something, I don't know if it's spiritual, religion, or hope to go on, because always must believe, you always must believe that something good to be.
Yeah, Susan, I would say, I think that the Seder itself in the Haggadah captures that with the motif of broken matzah. you know, the matzah is broken and you got to make do with the broken matzah, and some of it is left for dessert. And there's a lot of themes in the Haggadah about brokenness and making do with what you have in an imperfect world. And we talked about this last week with the charoset made out of apples to convey the resilience of the Israelite women who seduced their husbands so the Jewish people can continue. So there's a lot of symbolism in the Seder about having to accept an imperfect world and affirm life in the presence of that. Anyone else want to offer thoughts about about joy and music? John.
The song I would choose is from Fiddler, To Life. To life, to life, l'chaim, l'chaim, to life. And if our good fortunes never come, here's to whatever comes. Drink l'chaim to life, because that's all we have.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. By the way, if you invite your guests, whoever's coming to your Seder, whether in person or on Zoom, if you ask them to do some homework ahead, asking some question to bring some idea or some source or a song to the Seder table, they will be much more engaged. So you could ask them, what song would you think captures, or what idea, or etc. Or what thing might they bring? These are things that would enable them to contribute their voices to the Seder, and you'd have more voices going. Any other takers on this? And then I just want to close with an opportunity for anyone to ask any questions about running a Seder this year. So, okay, so I will just close. Anyone want to talk about what's on your mind if you are running a Seder this year or attending a Seder this year, and you have any questions about how and you're working stuff through, happy to have a conversation around it. Anybody? Okay, well, so I hope that we use this time. Let me just close with this thought. I think it is a gray zone for a Seder. Usually we like to think of Seder as spring and rebirth. And I think this season it's a little bit like the weather outside. I don't know if you've been outside, but it looks like it's spring, but it doesn't actually feel like spring. It looks like it's going to be warm, but it actually feels cold. And that feels a lot existentially like the mood that we're in. It feels like it should be warm, but there's still plenty of cold to go. So I think here is an insight from the Talmud that might be helpful to us, which is what happens when our internal life is not, what we feel is not where we want it to be, or our interior life is lagging. Like, what if you're not into it? What if your actual approach of Pesach is, Pesach, with the dishes, with the cleaning and COVID and So the Talmud says, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. Do it and then you feel it. If you do a deed, do it, then you feel it. You do deeds and eventually the feelings will come. So let's say right now you're not, the Seders are a week from Saturday night and the last thing you want to do is Passover. Shelo lishma ba lishma, you do it without feeling it, eventually you'll feel it. Do it, then feel it. Suggests that if you start to do your preparations, both the shopping and the cooking and the cleaning, and then also importantly, inviting your people, the people who are going to be at your Seder table or on your Seder screen, your Zoom, if you can begin engaging them in thinking about the Seder beforehand, that just the act of starting to prepare, you do it, then you feel it. Then by the time that first Seder shows up, you'll be more in the game. You'll be more in the mood, and so will your guests. And so I love what everyone said, but Harriet, I want to come to your comment about the soldier who did the who did Seders in wartime, this has been an awkward season to be sure. And there is a lot of unredeemed suffering, as John points out, that is undeniably true. But we Jews have done Passover in all kinds of seasons for 2,000 years, 4,000 years, however you count it. And it's not always been lovely, and it's not always been warm, and it's not always been flowers blooming. And so we have the world that we have, which has a lot of repair and redemption that has happened and a lot more to go. My prayer for all of us is let's do the deeds, do it, and then feel it. And then we will make Passover meaningful, inch by inch, with every deed that we do to prepare. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you next Tuesday. Take care.